This one's one of our favorites because everybody out there knows somebody who died as a direct result or an indirect result of this.
Mm-hmm.
And for those of you who lost loved ones in nursing homes, I am particularly sorry to you.
And Blake was one.
For that horrible, horrible shit.
Blake's grandmother passed away
Yep.
in an old folks' home by herself because no one was allowed to come and see her.
Hip's father
Mm-hmm.
in the hospital. They wouldn't let anybody near him.
Yep.
We tried to get people in there. I was on the phone that whole day with her and an advocate in Florida trying to get to an advocate in Illinois to get into that hospital. Just as we found somebody, she got notice that he died.
Yeah, and Darren would have died if I didn't sneak ivermectin into, where he was staying.
Yeah.
I literally went in there and I had a bunch of vitamins with ivermectin in there.
Mm-hmm.
And like, oh no, you can't leave any vitamins. I'm like, well, can I at least order him a pizza and you can take it back? Oh yeah, no problem. So I ordered
no vitamins, but you can give him pizza.
Yes. I don't know.
Hey!
I just lifted the pizza, put the ivermectin underneath there, put it on the counter. I'm like, can you take it back to him? She opened it, she closed it, and walked it right back to him. I sent him a text under pizza.
You could have put an Uzi under that pizza.
Yeah, I could have.
I'm not advocating such things.
Yeah.
But you could have.
I could have. But I'm an evil genius, so I figured it out on the fly.
That's insane.
I Green Beret that shit.
I learned so many tricks from you guys. The White House lab leaked the true origins of COVID-19. Now, look, 90% of the crap that went on around this was all psyop, but there was a bug. It just wasn't anywhere near as bad as everybody thought it was. It fucked you up.
Yeah.
It was a bad flu.
Well,
it would kill some people because the flu kills thousands of people every year.
Not on those years it didn't.
No.
Right.
Nobody got the common cold either.
That's right.
Zero. You go back and look at the CDC records for those years. Flu, 0. Common cold, 0.
What were you saying, Jimmy?
I was going to say, during 2020? The flu just magically disappeared.
Yes.
Yep.
Everything was COVID, from self-inflicted 9mm lobotomies
to motorcycle accident,
to motorcycle accidents, to anything.
Yep.
Just nope, COVID.
And
it's all
at the
COVID.
time, my wife sold pharma wholesale. She was selling pharma to pharmacies and hospitals. That was her job. She's forgotten more about drugs than most people will ever know. We'll have her on a show. We've been talking about that a couple of times. You and I have talked to her, and she said she will. We just haven't gotten to it yet. But she said that Tamiflu, which is one of the biggest sellers during flu season, sales stopped.
Huh. Wow.
The most popular flu remedy on the market stopped selling, period.
Wow. That's odd.
And now it's fine. Now the sales for it are fine.
Mm-hmm.
But during that period, there is a U-shaped dip.
I wonder why that is.
Shocker.
I don't know. All I can say is, by the time it really kicked off into full swing, I had ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine, enough for me and my family. So when there's a will, there's a way. You can get your hands on that shit.
I just didn't lick anything in public and
You were
ate
fine.
a lot of chicken soup and fresh herbs and turmeric.
Yeah. You rolled through it.
Yeah.
Like I caught, it was 2022. I caught a really bad case of the coof, and I am now just pulling out of it. I mean, it screwed me up for a good 2.5 years. The no energy, just the fucked up aches and everything.
Well, that might be because the virus possesses a biological characteristic that is not found in nature.
Yes.
Or possibly because data shows that all COVID-19 cases stem from a single introduction into humans. This runs contrary to previous pandemics where there were multiple spillover events. What that means is vectors. A vector is simply a way that a disease gets from an origin point to the rest of the population.
Well, typically, when Mother Nature creates something that will jump to humans, it's not just once. It happens in a population of animals, and it happens multiple times
Mhm.
in different areas.
Yes.
It doesn't just like, oh, in this one city block.
Mhm.
I mean,
The biggest example of that we have the most records for in the greatest detail is the bubonic plague.
Yep.
Which was carried by fleas on rats, not by the rats themselves. Everybody will blame the rats. It was the fleas on the rats that were
Yep.
carrying the bubonic plague. And exactly what you just described happened.
Yep.
Wuhan is home to China's foremost SARS research lab, which has a history of conducting gain-of-function research, gene-altering and organism supercharging at inadequate biosafety levels. Imagine the Chinese half-assing something. Gosh, I have a hard time picturing the Chinese half-assing something.
Well, especially...
Is my sarcasm palpable?
Well, again, you're dealing with individuals who are working in that lab who probably were not making a lot of money and wanted to make a little, ching on the side, and we're selling some of these lab animals into the public.
You're a racist.
Whatever, that's fine.
Yeah, okay.
But I mean, that's the only thing I could think of how it got into the excuse it got into the wet market, because that's where they take stuff to get slaughtered and sold for food.
Yeah.
The reason why it's called a wet market is because they literally have an irrigation ditch that's like 3 to 4 inches wide, where water runs through. So that's where they throw all the guts and stuff that
So
cannot
I
sell.
have been to that part of the world, like as in lived over there extensively over a period of 8 years. Jimmy, you're describing it well enough. In the cleaner countries like Korea and Japan, those trenches, they regularly hose them down and they practice pretty clean behavior with them. They do run off into sewers and everything, but there's a certain amount of that in any given country. However, in China, they just throw shit in those trenches and nobody bothers to hose it down. So basically, you've got rotting entrails just laying in the ditch.
What could go wrong?
Which is the perfect vector for disease transmission.
Cholera.
Or worse.
Yeah, or worse. Yeah.
Or worse, apparently. By nearly all measures of science, if there was evidence of a natural origin, it would have already surfaced, but it has not. Now, the Hunan seafood market was 7.5 miles away from the Wuhan Institute, but there was a wet market. You can see to the north here, the lake. That's a very populated area. There were wet markets around there. I guarantee it.
Oh, yeah.
Because, again,
first of all, when you look at that aerial view, that's a lot of people living in that one area.
Yeah.
And if you think there's just one fucking market, you're out of your... They wouldn't be able to feed everyone. You got to have multiple ones.
Again, I lived in that part of the world for a very long time. The way that those markets work is for every neighborhood, there's a market.
Yes.
It's every neighborhood. And each neighborhood is really only about 10 city blocks.
It's kind of like before 1970, there, like all of the cities around where I'm at in Warren and Centerline and Roseville.
We all had our own butchers. We all had our own dairy.
They all had those little bodegas that were every couple blocks. You could walk to it. Those are gone now.
Where I lived in Shelby was primarily dairy farms, but there was one central store that was built in like 1830.
Where you buy all your shit.
And it was still going in the mid 90s, and then they finally tore it down.
Yeah.
Now, of course, it's a Starbucks.
Of course.
Because fuck those clowns.
Got to have Starbucks.
Proximal origin publication. Proximal origin of SARS-CoV-2 publication, which was used repeatedly by public health officials and the media to discredit the lab leak theory, was prompted by Dr. Fauci. A lab-related incident involving gain-of-function research is the most likely origin. Current government mechanisms for overseeing this dangerous gain-of-function research are incomplete, severely convoluted, and lack global accountability. Now, on gain-of-function, what that is taking something that can make you sick and making it stronger so that it can kill you.
Or you take a virus that only affects animals and fucking with it so it affects humans.
Yes. Pop and I both went through all of the chemical weapons and bioweapons classes and all of that stuff when we were in the military, particularly because of what we did. We saw a lot more of it than most people would. The thing that I noted about all of these is if you've got sarin, for example, and sarin was
You're
used
dead.
in a subway in Japan,
Uh-huh.
you're dead, but it's got a limited range.
Yeah, it
Those
dissipates.
things have a limited range. Same with mustard gas in World War One.
Yeah.
The reason it was effective is because they threw so much of it. But with this virus, it is clear that this thing was distributed. There is no way that it moved that quickly.
Or, hear me out,
Okay.
it actually was released accidentally a lot earlier,
Mm-hmm.
and they didn't say anything about it on purpose.
There were reports of guys with the similar symptoms in November.
Yes. And by the time it actually got into the media and they started talking about it in China, people had already been all over the United States from China. There was a lot of traveling.
This was so fast.
Yes.
So fast.
No, I mean,
tells me that there was some deliberateness to it.
well, Bullshido
Yep.
was in Seattle,
Mhm.
and before he came here, he was laid up for like 3-4 weeks with some new bullshit that made him incredibly sick.
Yep. Oh,
Who
we know they're
knows?
still doing this shit.
Yeah.
There's no way they're not still doing it. They didn't just do this and then go, oh, we're sorry. We won't do it again.
Nope.
There's no way that's happened.
Yeah, and listen, when the rest of the world decides to say, you know what, China, fuck off, we're suing you. I mean, they're already confiscating farmland back from China here in the United States because I think
Which they should have never had to begin with.
well, you're right, but I'm trying to remember the state that actually sued China and won like $22 billion.
It's either Idaho or South Dakota.
I don't remember, but
Idaho or South Dakota.
You're going to see that happen in virtually every state here in the United States, and they're going to go after China for monetary damages, and other countries are going to do the same thing, and it's probably going to wind up in a world war.
Let's see. The state, I just did a quick search. Missouri plans to seize assets to make China pay $24.5 billion in judgment. And that is coming from the AP News.
Yeah!
There you go. There you go. See, the button pushing monkey pushes more buttons than just those buttons that you see.
Yep, it does look like it. Yep, it is. It is Missouri, according to 4 articles that I have just seen. So there you go.
You figure
there you have it.
50 states, if they all win a similar judgment, like $25 billion, that's like $3 trillion. That's a lot of money.
We need a government that is for us because the government we have at the moment clearly is against us.
Yes, they've been paid for.
We have one side that is completely and utterly hell-bent on destroying our country, and the other side is saying, well, slow down there. You can't be doing that. No, I want motherfuckers on the other side of the aisle that says
it's a stage show.
Listen here, mother. It's all WWE showboating bullshit. Yes. I think I can count on out of the 535 representatives that we have in the Senate and Congress, I can count on one hand of people that I have just a tiny little bit of trust in.
Yep.
Now, here's the thing. Everybody's talking about China in relation to this, but we've got Echo Health. Jimmy, will you look up where Echo Health is, please? ECOHEALT
on it.
Under the leadership of Peter Daszak, used U.S. taxpayer dollars, oh, hello, USAID, to facilitate dangerous gain-of-function research in Wuhan, China. After the Select Subcommittee released evidence of Echo Health violating the terms of its National Institutes of Health grant, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services commenced official debarment proceedings and suspended all funding to Echo Health. New evidence shows that the Department of Justice has opened an investigation into Echo Health's pandemic-era activities.
Huh.
Okay, let's see here.
Is
click the about here. Echo Health, Alliance's global impact, building on over 45 years of groundbreaking science, Earth. You're not telling me where the fuck you're located from, you bastards.
Probably not by coincidence, I would guess.
Oh, scrolling all the way down to the bottom of this page, it says they are at 520 8th Avenue, STE 1200, New York, New York.
Sweet. 1200 New York, New York. I guarantee you that a major health thing is not operating out of that part of New York.
Yeah.
The one thing that I really want to know about that there, and also NIH's procedures for funding and overseeing potentially dangerous research are deficient, unreliable, and pose a serious threat to both public health and national security. Further, National Institute of Health fostered an environment that promoted evading federal record-keeping laws as seen through the actions of Dr. David Morans and FOIA lady Marge Moore. Fauci also received a full and unconditional pardon for any offenses against the United States which he may have committed or taken part in from January 1st, 2014. You can't issue a pardon without a crime. That's the whole definition of a pardon.
That's right.
So I have a really big question. Where are the fucking arrests, Pam Bondi?
Make it fucking happen.
The arrests? We're fucking through with this. Where are the arrests for this? This is obvious.
Yep.
The American people get really, really, really tired of this shit.
Yep. We're tired of the dog and pony shows. We're ready for the gallows and the firing squad shows.
That one moment right there gave me a splitting headache.
Yeah. Well, now you know how I feel.
Yeah. The Biden administration's HHS engaged in a multi-year campaign of delay, confusion, and non-responsiveness in an attempt to obstruct the select subcommittee's investigation and hide evidence that could incriminate or embarrass senior public health officials. It appears that HHS even intentionally under-resourced its component that responds to legislative oversight requests. So there's a crime. I'm going to look it up here real quick.
What are you looking up?
You're
talking in Dwarvish. I gotcha.
Ladies and gentlemen, I give you 18 U.S. Code Section 4, misprison of felony. Whoever, having knowledge of the actual commission of a felony cognizable by a court of the United States, conceals and does not, as soon as possible, make known the same to some judge or other person in civil or military authority under the United States, shall be fined under this title or imprisoned for not more than 3 years or both. Now, it sounds suspiciously to me
That's exactly what they did.
like the Biden administration's HHS engaged in a multi-year campaign of delay, confusion, and non-responsiveness in an attempt to obstruct the select subcommittee's investigation and hide evidence that could incriminate or embarrass senior public health officials. That's misprison of felony.
That's exactly what I just read it.
18 U.S. Code Section 4.
No, but that's only 3 years.
I don't care. I want an arrest.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, I know they're all not going to hang, but those people right there, the crime that they committed is misprison of felony. Give them the maximum 3 years. That disbars them from public office, strips them of their right to vote, and shames them.
And make sure they go to Supermax, general population.
General population at Pelican Bay.
Ooh.
And to be honest, we still have people from January 6th that are still in isolation and in prison. And they have not have their due process, but some illegal from El Salvador can have his due process.
There's another conspiracy, and that's more misprison of felony.
Yep. I don't know, man. This is so huge. It's going to take at least 15 years to clean this all up.
It'll take 50 years to clean it up.
Last night, I was at a meeting where we discussed possible routes of action. Once again, FBI special agents, frickin' frack. Sorry, sit back down, enjoy your granola bars and hemorrhoids.
Okay.
I have to look up the actual laws, and I'm going to get back to this one. But the concept of a grand jury was originally 16 to 23 citizens
Uh-huh.
who formed a grand jury and brought forth an investigation.
Or charges.
Hang on. It starts with an investigation. The grand jury would look at what they think is a crime, investigate it. And if they felt they had enough, then they would bring it to a prosecutor. The prosecutor would then issue the warrant. The warrant would bring in the perpetrator who would go before a judge.
Okay.
In 1946 or thereabouts, the court systems deliberately conspired to remove the power of the grand jury from the citizenry and give it to the prosecutor, who now calls a grand jury,
Huh.
taking away the citizens' ability to deal with shit like this.
Wow.
That's what the grand jury was for.
Like, dude, man, you mean like the citizens had like the ultimate power back then?
Crazy.
I know.
It's
What?
crazy.
Dude.
And like politicians and people like that were bureaucrats, were public servants,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the hired fucking help.
Yeah, listen,
We'll
I'm
do a whole thing on grand jury. That's
actually-
a worthwhile topic.
we need to actually figure out how to get that unfucked, because the government needs to fear the citizen.
Yes.
And by taking away that power from the citizens, you literally are giving too much power to the government.
That's what the purpose of it was.
Yeah.
It was sometime around 1946. I've got the law bookmarked at home. I just came across this yesterday morning and started really looking into it. But another thing that I realized about a week and a half ago, and that's what put me on this path, is the Declaration of Independence.
Uh-huh.
Bunch of guys literally got together in a tavern, wrote that shit. Okay?
And that was basically a grand jury.
It's a grand jury indictment.
Against the king.
Yep.
Yeah.
The
I remember that.
Declaration of Independence is a grand jury.
I believe we talked about this like 2 shows back.
Yeah, I think that's possible.
Yeah. That's the only way I remember it.
That's fine. Yep.
I'm a circle thinker. I have
So
brain damage.
we need to start talking more about that power and why we should have that power back. We could literally go on for
forever,
another couple of days on this here. I think we've made the point.
Well, hang on.
But
so I'm just trying to wrap my head around this. Is there anything else with that gain of function release from the White House? Because I want to
it's
make
on the
sure.
White House website. We're going to have all of the links out there so that everybody can see all of this goodness.
But another thing that we need to talk about really quick is how many times Fauci lied to the American people and Congress on national fucking TV.
I would say that everything he said was one lie after another with the intent of covering it all up.
But the thing is that they're like, okay, you're doing gain of function. And he's like, no, we're not doing gain of function, because technically they didn't say they're doing gain of function. They renamed it something else, which is just,
I agree.
They're just flip-flopping definitions for the same fucking thing.
Yes.
And they're allowing him to get away with this. And I just can't wrap my head around how they did that or why they did that.
Yep.
What do you mean you can't wrap your head around that?
All right.
I heard what
exposed
you said, and I understood the words.
We're exposed to a biological weapon.
Yes.
And then we're sold a false bill of goods on something that would keep it from spreading and cure it, which it did. It neither cured nor prevented the spread, and it didn't even help people who were reinfected. In fact, it made it even worse. Now, on top of that, you had all of the blood clots, the white, scar tissue clots, which are being ignored by the mainstream media.
Okay.
You have the people who were getting, heart irritation, either the sac around the heart or the heart muscle itself.
Yes.
Which, by the way, if that happens to you, you have about a decade left to live.
Yes.
Because you usually die from that within 10 years. So your prognosis is not good.
Because your heart simply cannot take the strain.
And on top of that, we have all of these, they track the 5-year moving average of average deaths every year. Ever since 2020, that has been higher. again, mainstream media has ignored that. Now, if you go with all of the sick people that were put in old folks' homes or rest homes, just to, in my opinion, to cause these people to die, right?
Yes.
Then you have...
It was a culling.
Yeah, it's exactly what they did. They are literally massacring us en masse, and nobody is doing shit about it.
They're culling us in specific groups. They'll go for the weak ones because at that time in this pandemic, weak people are dying, and people can write that off psychologically. They can say, oh, well,
he was old,
and he was weak, and he was already a little sick.
Uh-huh.
They're culling you in groups, dummy. Lots A, B, and C have just been culled. You're lot D, E, or F.
And they're coming for you next.
Yeah, the first lots were the old and the infirm.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
That ones that had 2 to 4 underlying issues.
Yep.
And then they introduced the jibby jabs, and then we had 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, 15-year-olds,
Yep.
healthy 20-year-olds.
Athletes dropping dead on fields.
Dead.
That was to get you to start accepting the culling.
Oh, well, actually, between 1950 and 2019, the number of total athletes that had dropped dead on fields in the United States was somewhere around 1,500.
Yep.
In a 2-year period, I believe that count was somewhere close to 3,000.
Yep.
In what world is that fucking normal? Even the mainstream media normalized this.
Yep.
And they're like, oh, yeah, that's just a sudden death syndrome. Like,
Yeah.
wait a minute.
Yeah.
In the real world where I grew up, people just didn't drop dead in their prime.
Yeah, British soccer players that have been playing for years on end, maybe even decades, don't just drop dead from heart attacks
Guys,
for no
like
good
run
reason.
a marathon and a half.
Yeah.
Look, I personally don't like soccer. I think it's a little light in the loafers.
Uh-huh. It is.
But those athletes,
they're in good shape.
they're good. Those guys can run a marathon and a half without batting a fucking eyelash.
Yeah.
Yep.
They're in shape. I just don't like the game that they play.
I don't like the game.
I don't like the game either, but you go ahead and jump on the soccer pitch and you go kick a ball around for 90 minutes.
Yeah.
Good luck with
I'll
that.
respect their endurance all damn day. But they're young. They're at peak physical condition. They're eating well. They're hydrated, and they're still dropping dead. Gee, what could be going on here? all of the sudden things like sudden infant death syndrome or SIDS start to look suspicious.
Watch Grunt Speak live every Tuesday and Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern. And if you want to join Pop for Supporter Sundays, go to redonkulous.com/donate and make a monthly pledge. A link is in the Meat Gazer box.